The mockery. The morning shift at Nexus Station's premier
told you we
starship
should have
facility
taken that
had
left
just
turn at
begun when the
Albuquerque.
automated doors hissed open, revealing a figure that immediately drew stares of disgust and amusement. The man who shuffled into Stellar Dynamics' repair bay looked like he had crawled out from the station's forgotten maintenance shafts. His clothes bore the telltale signs of someone who slept wherever darkness offered shelter, and his unkempt hair fell past shoulders that had once carried the weight of entire fleets. But nobody knew that yet. Marcus Kane had been walking the lower decks of Nexus Station for 3 years now, invisible to those who mattered, visible only when someone wanted to feel superior. His stomach had been empty for 2 days, and the smell of heated metal and quantum fuel from the repair bay reminded him of better times, times when his name meant something more than another vagrant to chase away. The repair bay stretched before him like a cathedral of technology. Ships of every classification hung suspended in gravitational fields, while mechanics in expensive exosuits worked on their hulls. At the center of it all sat something that made Marcus stop in his tracks. A Zenari battlecruiser, one of only 12 ever built, floated in the main repair dock with its entire propulsion array exposed. The alien vessel's organic metal hybrid structure pulsed with a sickly yellow light that indicated severe system failure. "Hey, someone call security," shouted Rodriguez, the youngest mechanic on the floor. "We got another tunnel rat looking for handouts." The head mechanic, a woman named Chen who had worked her way up from the mining colonies, looked up from her diagnostic pad. Her expression shifted from concentration to annoyance as she saw Marcus standing near the entrance. "This is a restricted area, old man. Food dispensaries are on level 7. Marcus kept his eyes on the Zenari ship. He could hear it, that subtle harmonic distortion that others would mistake for normal engine noise. But to someone who had once commanded a fleet through the Andromeda Passage, who had negotiated peace treaties while piloting through asteroid fields, that sound meant only one thing. The ship was dying, and these mechanics had no idea why. "I can fix that ship," Marcus said, his voice rough from disuse but carrying an undertone of absolute certainty. In exchange for one meal, the repair bay erupted in laughter. Rodriguez nearly dropped his plasma welder, and Chen's assistant, a 4-armed Altarian named Zek, made a chittering sound that passed for amusement among his species. Even the normally stoic security android seemed to process this as a humor subroutine. Chen walked over, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor. She stood a full head shorter than Marcus but carried herself with the authority of someone who had earned respect through competence. "Do you have any idea what you're looking at? That's a Zenari Praetorian-class battlecruiser. The Galactic Council sent it here specifically because we're the only facility in 3 systems with the expertise to handle Zenari biotech." "And you've been working on it for how long?" Marcus asked, still not taking his eyes off the ship. 2 weeks, 3? Chen's expression darkened. It had been exactly 3 weeks, and they were no closer to solving the problem than when they started. The ship's owner, a Zenari diplomat named Krexval, was growing impatient, and the repair bay's reputation was on the line. "Lucky guess," Rodriguez sneered. "Every deadbeat who wanders in here thinks they know something about ships because they once worked on a cargo hauler." Marcus finally turned to face them, and for just a moment something flickered in his gray eyes that made Chen take an involuntary step back. It wasn't anger or hurt. It was something far more dangerous. It was pity. "The bio-neural interface is rejecting the quantum stabilizers," Marcus said calmly. "You're treating it like a mechanical problem. But Zenari ships are living organisms. When they're in pain, they shut down non-essential systems to protect themselves. That harmonic you're hearing? That's the ship screaming." The laughter died instantly. Zek's forearms went still and Rodriguez's smirk faded. Chen pulled up her diagnostic pad and scrolled through 3 weeks of data. Everything they had tried had been based on mechanical solutions, treating the ship like any other vessel. "How could you possibly know that?" Chen demanded. "Zenari technology is classified. Only military personnel with alpha clearance have access to those specifications." Marcus smiled, but it was a smile full of ghosts. "I said I could fix it. I didn't say how I knew." Chen's second-in-command, an older man named Thompson who had served in the Colonial Defense Force, stepped forward. There was something about the way Marcus stood, despite his ragged appearance, that triggered old military memories. "What's your name, vagrant?" "Does it matter?" Marcus replied. "I'm just someone who needs a meal and can solve your problem." Fair trade, wouldn't you say? Rodriguez laughed again, but it sounded forced now. Even if you're right about the diagnosis, fixing a bioneural interface requires specialized equipment worth millions of credits. You'd need a neural link calibrator, quantum field harmonizers, and most importantly, you'd need to understand Zenari biosignatures. Their technology reads the pilot's neural patterns. You can't just fake that. Marcus walked toward the ship, ignoring the security android that moved to intercept him. Chen raised a hand, stopping the android. She wanted to see where this would go. You don't need expensive equipment, Marcus said, running his hand along the ship's organic hull. The metal seemed to ripple at his touch, a response Chen had never seen before. You need to understand that Zenari ships bond with their pilots. This one is mourning. Its previous pilot died, didn't they? Chen's diagnostic pad clattered to the floor. That information wasn't in any database. Krexaval had mentioned it only in passing, that he had inherited the ship from his predecessor who had died in an accident. But how could this homeless man know that? The ship needs to trust again, Marcus continued, his hand still on the hull. You've been trying to force it to accept new programming, but that's like trying to force someone to forget their dead spouse and immediately remarry. It needs time, patience, and most importantly, it needs to feel safe. Thompson stepped closer, studying Marcus's face. There was something familiar about those features, something he couldn't quite place. You've worked with Zenari ships before? It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded slowly. A long time ago. In a different life. Chen picked up her diagnostic pad, her mind racing. Everything the vagrant said aligned with obscure research papers she had read about Zenari technology. Theories that were never proven because so few humans had ever interfaced with their ships. But this man spoke as if he had lived those theories. Prove it, Chen challenged. If you can establish even a basic connection with the ship, I'll personally buy you a week's worth of meals. The repair bay fell silent. Everyone knew that human-Zenari neural interfaces were nearly impossible. The two species' brain patterns were too different. Only a handful of humans in history had successfully piloted Zenari vessels, and they were all military legends or dead. Usually both. Marcus closed his eyes and placed both hands on the ship's hull. For a long moment, nothing happened. Rodriguez was about to make another snide comment when the ship's light suddenly shifted from sickly yellow to a soft blue. A harmonic tone, pleasant and melodious, filled the repair bay. The diagnostic screens around the bay lit up with data streams that Chen had never seen before. The ship was communicating, actually communicating, sharing its system information voluntarily instead of having it extracted through invasive scans. Impossible, Zek whispered in his multi-tonal voice. The neural compatibility index would need to be over 90%. No human has ever achieved that without years of training. Marcus opened his eyes and they were wet with unshed tears. She says her name is Whisper of Stars. Her previous pilot called her Whisper for short. She's been trying to tell you what's wrong, but you haven't been listening. Chen's hands trembled as she read the data streaming across her pad. Everything they had been doing wrong was laid out in perfect detail. The ship hadn't been malfunctioning. It had been protecting itself from their repairs, interpreting their interventions as attacks. Who are you? Thompson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The military bearing Marcus had been hiding was becoming more apparent with each passing moment. Marcus stepped away from the ship, and immediately the lights dimmed back to yellow, though not as sickly as before. I'm nobody. Just someone who understands that machines, especially living ones, need compassion as much as competence. Chen made a decision that would change everything. Show us how to fix her. I'll pay you contractor rates, full union scale. Marcus shook his head. I don't want your money. Just a meal, and maybe... He paused, looking back at the ship. Maybe the chance to help her sing again. Rodriguez, his earlier mockery forgotten, asked the question everyone was thinking. Why would someone with your skills be living in the tunnels? What happened to you? Marcus's expression closed off like blast doors slamming shut. Everyone has a story. Mine just happens to have an unhappy ending. He turned back to Chen. Do we have a deal? One meal for fixing your impossible problem? Chen nodded, but she was already planning something more. She had seen enough to know that this wasn't just some random vagrant with lucky guesses. This was someone extraordinary hiding in plain sight, and she was determined to find out why. The legend revealed. The repair bay had never been so quiet. Word had spread through the station that something unprecedented was happening in stellar dynamics. Mechanics from other ships had come to watch, cramming into observation decks and peering through windows. Even Krexaval, the Zanari diplomat who owned the ship, had arrived, his elongated form towering over the human workers. Marcus worked with a focus that seemed to shut out the entire universe. He had refused the neural interface helmet Chen offered, instead working with his bare hands and an ancient set of tools that he had pulled from his ragged coat. They looked like relics from a museum, but in his hands they danced across the ship's bio-neural pathways with surgical precision. "Those tools," Thompson said quietly to Chen. "I've seen them before. In the Military Heritage Museum on Earth. They belong to—" His voice trailed off as the impossible thought formed in his mind. Chen pulled up her secure database, entering parameters that she had never thought to search before. The results made her blood run cold. She looked at Thompson, then at the vagrant working on the million-credit warship, and finally understood the magnitude of what she was witnessing. Marcus had been working for 3 hours straight, occasionally humming a melody that the ship seemed to respond to. The yellow glow had shifted through the spectrum, moving toward healthier greens and blues. Whisper of Stars was healing, not through forced repairs but through something that looked more like therapy. "The harmonic frequency he's using," Zek observed, his forearms gesticulating excitedly. "It's not in any manual. He's improvising, creating a unique resonance pattern in real time based on the ship's responses." Rodriguez, who had been the cruelest in his mockery, now watched with something approaching awe. "How does he know what the ship needs? It's like he can hear its thoughts." "Because I can," Marcus said without looking up. "When you've spent enough time in the void, when you've trusted your life to living metal and quantum consciousness, you learn to listen with more than your ears." He paused, running his hand along a particularly damaged section. "She's been trying to tell you about the cascade failure in her memory core. Her previous pilot's death wasn't an accident. Someone sabotaged the navigation system." Krexval's 6 eyes widened in alarm. "That's impossible." "The investigation found no evidence of tampering." Marcus finally looked up, meeting the Zanari's gaze directly. "They weren't looking in the right place. The sabotage was in the emotional response matrix, not the mechanical systems. Someone who understood Zanari technology very well, wanted your predecessor dead but wanted it to look like an accident." The implication sent a chill through the repair bay. Chen immediately began recording everything, understanding that this was now a crime scene as well as a repair job. "How long have you known?" Krexaval asked, his translated voice carrying undertones of respect that hadn't been there before. "Since I touched her," Marcus replied, returning to his work. "Ships like this, they remember everything. Every joy, every trauma. She's been carrying the guilt of failing her pilot, not understanding that she was sabotaged. That's why she wouldn't accept a new pilot. She thought she was dangerous." Thompson couldn't contain himself any longer. "You're Marcus Kane, Commander Marcus Kane of the Terran Fleet, the pilot who ran the Proxima blockade." The repair bay erupted in gasps and exclamations. Even those too young to remember the name had heard the stories. Marcus Kane, the greatest pilot humanity had ever produced, who had saved 3 colony worlds by flying an impossible route through a collapsing star system. The man who had disappeared 15 years ago after the Cassiopeia incident, Chen whispered. Marcus's hand stilled on the ship's hull. The temperature in the repair bay seemed to drop several degrees. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. That name belonged to someone else. Someone who thought being a hero meant never failing. Someone who learned too late that one moment of perfection doesn't balance a lifetime of absence. Nobody spoke. They all knew the story, or thought they did. The Cassiopeia incident, where a routine diplomatic mission had gone wrong. Where Marcus Kane's own daughter had been on a civilian transport that was caught in the crossfire. Where the great Commander Kane had to choose between saving his daughter's ship or preventing a war that would have killed millions. He had prevented the war. She would have been 23 today, Marcus said, his hands resuming their work on the ship. My Sarah, she wanted to be a pilot like her father. I was going to teach her after that last mission. He laughed bitterly. I saved 3 million strangers and lost the one person who mattered most. Chen felt tears on her cheeks. The official reports had said Commander Kane had died in the incident, but now she understood. He had died in every way that mattered, leaving only this shell behind. Your wife, Thompson said gently, couldn't look at me. Neither could I. Marcus's movements became more focused, almost violent in their precision, so Commander Kane disappeared and a nobody took his place. Someone who could sleep in maintenance tunnels and beg for food, someone who deserved that life. Krexval moved forward, his massive form surprisingly graceful. In Zanari culture, we believe the dead speak through the living. Your daughter speaks through every life you saved. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Pretty words don't bring back the dead. They don't undo choices. They don't... He stopped, his hand pressed against the ship. Wait. She's trying to show me something. The ship's lights suddenly blazed brilliant white and holographic displays materialized around Marcus. Data streams that had been hidden in the ship's deep memory cores flooded the bay's screens. Chen gasped as she recognized navigation logs, communication records, and most importantly, video footage from the day of the sabotage. There, Marcus pointed to a timestamp. The saboteur. They used a Zanari emotional virus, something that would only activate when the pilot was experiencing extreme stress. It was murder, but more than that, it was a test run. Krexval's skin shifted through several colors, a sign of extreme agitation. A test for what? Marcus pulled up more data, his fingers flying across the holographic interfaces with the skill that had once made him legendary. For a larger attack. This virus, it's still dormant in 17 other Zanari ships, all diplomatic vessels. Someone's planning to eliminate the entire Zanari peace delegation. The repair bay erupted in chaos. Krexval immediately began sending emergency communications to his homeworld. Chen started documenting everything for the authorities, but Marcus kept working on the ship, now with renewed purpose. I can purge the virus, he said. Not just from Whisper, but I can create an antivirus that will work on all affected ships. But I need complete access to her core systems. Krexval didn't hesitate. Do it. For the next 2 hours, Marcus Kane, the greatest pilot who ever lived, the broken father who had chosen duty over love, worked with a determination that reminded everyone why legends were born. The ship responded to him like a long-lost friend, opening systems that had been locked for months, sharing secrets that had been buried in quantum memory. When he finally stepped back, Whisper of Stars was humming with a sound that could only be described as joy. The organic metal gleamed with health, and system readings showed performance levels that exceeded factory specifications. It's done, Marcus said, swaying slightly. Chen caught his arm, surprised by how thin he was beneath the ragged clothes. You saved them, Rodriguez said, his voice full of awe. You saved all of them? Marcus shook his head. Whisper saved them. I just listened. Krexval approached, his massive form lowering until he was eye level with Marcus. The Zanari people owe you a debt that cannot be repaid. Name your reward. Marcus looked around the repair bay at the faces that had mocked him hours ago, now staring at him with respect and wonder. Then he looked at Chen. That meal you promised. Maybe make it 2? I'm hungrier than I thought. Chen laughed through her tears. You could have anything. A ship of your own, a position with the fleet, your rank restored. No. The word was firm. Final. Commander Kane is dead. Let him stay dead. He was never as good as people thought anyway. Thompson stepped forward. What will you do? Marcus looked at Whisper of Stars one last time. The ship pulsed gently, a farewell between friends. Same thing I've been doing, surviving. Maybe helping a few ships along the way if they'll let me. He started walking toward the exit, but Chen called out. Wait, at least let us clean you up, get you some proper clothes, a place to stay. Marcus paused at the door. You know what the problem with being a legend is? Everyone expects you to keep being one. They don't realize that legends are just people who got lucky once and unlucky every time after. He turned back, and for the first time since entering the repair bay, genuinely smiled. But thank you for letting me help her. It's been a long time since I felt useful. 3 weeks later, a small repair shop opened in the lowest levels of Nexus Station. It had no sign, no advertising, just word of mouth that if you had a ship that nobody else could fix, especially if it was alien technology, there was an old man who would help. He never asked for payment beyond what people could afford, usually just a meal or supplies. Chen visited regularly, bringing food and companionship. She never told anyone else who he really was, respecting his wish for anonymity. But sometimes, when the station's alarm sounded and emergency lights flashed, indicating another ship in critical distress, she would see him standing at his shop's entrance, those gray eyes alert and ready. The legend of Commander Marcus Kane had died with his daughter in the Cassiopeia incident. But the man who remained, the vagrant who could hear the songs of dying ships, had found something perhaps more valuable than glory. He had found a way to live with his ghosts, one repair at a time, one saved life at a time. Rodriguez, who had learned humility that day in the repair bay, became Marcus's unofficial assistant. He would bring the old man challenging cases, ships that stumped even the best mechanics, and Marcus would touch their hulls, listen to their songs, and fix what others couldn't see was broken. The Zenari diplomatic delegation was saved 3 months later when the virus activated. The antivirus Marcus had created worked perfectly, preventing what would have been a catastrophic loss of life and potentially war. Krexeval tried many times to reward Marcus, but the old man always refused, saying the same thing. Whisper already gave me what I needed. She reminded me that even broken things can still help others heal. On quiet nights, when the station's lights dimmed and the repair bays fell silent, you could sometimes hear Marcus humming that strange melody he had used to heal Whisper of Stars. Those who knew music said it sounded like a lullaby, something a father might sing to his daughter. And in the depths of space, 17 Zenari ships carried within their quantum cores a gift from a human who had lost everything. Not just an antivirus, but something more. A fragment of code that would forever remember the vagrant who had saved them, ensuring that Marcus Kane's true legend would live on, not in history books or military archives, but in the living memory of ships that sailed between the stars. The greatest pilot who ever lived had become something more. He had become the man who taught humanity that sometimes the most profound heroism comes not from those who stand in the light, but from those who work in the shadows, asking for nothing more than a meal and the chance to make things right, one small repair at a time.